Welcome to the book study on the Quality Indicators for Assistive Technology. We're on Chapter 3, Quality Indicators for Assessment of AT Needs. The quote for this chapter is, "Team members who participate in decision-making and then implement their own decisions are knowledgeable and empowered." Our objectives for this chapter are to learn the key components involved in an AT assessment, discuss resources that assist a team in the assessment of AT needs, and also take a look at the self-examination matrix, which helps districts understand where they are in relation to best practices of AT in the area of assessment. Before we move on to the AT assessment process, let's review consideration outcomes because most often you've come to the point where you need an AT assessment because you've been considering assistive technology and determined that further information is needed. So in the process of AT consideration, a team may determine that no AT is needed, and that's when a student is making adequate yearly progress on their goals without the use of AT. The student has access to curriculum without AT, and the student is communicating effectively without AT. And so the team has determined no AT is needed. The team may determine that AT is needed, and some examples include that the student is currently using AT in order to make adequate yearly progress on IEP goals. So the team wants to document that AT that has been used. Or AT is used by the student to access curriculum, and the use of AT allows the student to remain in the least restrictive environment. If the team determines that further information is needed to determine if there is an AT need or a need for AT as an accommodation, then you're moving towards an assessment. Here's the differences between AT consideration and AT assessment. AT consideration can occur within the IEP meeting. It can be completed with the information that the team already has about the student. It looks at the student's ability to progress towards goals with assistance or without assistance to receive a free and appropriate education. In contrast, an AT assessment is completed over a span of time, so days, weeks, even months, and can occur outside of the IEP meeting. It involves obtaining new information to make the decision about AT supports that are needed. It takes multiple interactions with the student and with the team members and involves an AT trial. There are some national trends in AT, specifically in the area of assessment, but there's a change in the view of assistive technology assessment from a one-shot separate event to an ongoing continual part of the educational planning. There's a change in who conducts the assistive technology assessment from an expert model to a local team in the natural setting. So instead of having a base or a center where the student might come for an assessment by an expert, the local team is conducting the assessment in that child's classroom in their natural setting. Again, there's a change in the scheduling of the assistive technology assessment, meaning from that one-time isolated event to that ongoing continual process. In many districts, procedures for conducting AT assessment are not clearly defined, or procedures are not customized to meet the needs of students. A team approach to assessment may not be utilized. Individuals participating in the assessment do not have the needed skills and do not seek out assistance from maybe someone who does have the skills. Sufficient time is not given to AT trials. The student is not involved in the assessment process. When there is an independent AT team, there may be a lack of communication between that IEP team and the AT team. And remember how important it is to consider that customary environment and for those who know the student the best to be determining the solutions. So communicating with that IEP team is vital. Also, in many districts, parents and guardians may not be included in the process. And this is important, of course, for the students and the parents to be informed, but also because that AT may be needed in the home environment as well as the school environment. Let's review the law. We've discussed in previous chapters the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and how AT devices and AT services are both defined. We wanted to focus in on how IDEA defines AT services. AT services is defined as any service that directly assists a child with a disability in the selection, acquisition, or use of an assistive technology device. Furthermore, we see that evaluation is part of an AT service. The evaluation of the needs of a child with a disability, including a functional evaluation of the child in the child's customary environment. This is the definition of evaluation under this AT section in IDEA. Let's start with Quality Indicator 1 for assessment of AT. Procedures of all aspects of assistive technology assessment are clearly defined and consistently applied. Here's a roadmap to the assessment process and how that flows to the implementation. So we have information gathering, decision making, conducting trials, and then moving on to documentation and implementation. Documentation in the IEP and implementation of AT will be discussed in other chapters. Today we're focused on this AT process. So an AT assessment begins with an assessment question and identification of the measurable outcome. So are we measuring speed, quantity, quality, accuracy, endurance? What do we expect to change or improve? And what barriers are we needing the student to overcome? An AT assessment plan can help identify the question and also the measurable outcomes. Let's take a look at the resource that QIAT provides, because districts do not need to reinvent the wheel on this. There's many resources out there that provide a process, and so QIAT has the Assistive Technology Assessment Process Planner. When you go to the QIAT website, the home page of the website will look like this, and you'll go under Resources, Resource Bank, and you'll need to go to Resource Home. When you go to Resource Home, you find all of the guiding documents that are basically the chapters in the book. So if you were unable to purchase the book, wanted to share this information with others, you have all of the chapters. But we also have QIAT in Action, and here's where we can find the Assistive Technology Assessment Process Planner, among other documents that are provided in other chapters. So let's take a look at the Word document, and one reason they're provided in Word is so that districts can also customize them. I mentioned in the first indicator that it's important for these processes to be locally defined so that people have buy-in and they have provided input to the planning process. So this is one way for you to not have to reinvent the wheel, but start with something and make it your own. Let's take a look at what this planner looks like. I'll make it a little bit larger so you can see it. And in the beginning it talks about the referral for an AT assessment. So that's been made, and here we're identifying the plan for the assessment. So the AT assessment is completed by a collaborative team sharing responsibilities, and you might determine those team members and be defining some of the roles. You're going to create a written AT assessment plan that includes determining the assessment question. Why are we doing this assessment in the first place? Are they not making progress on a specific goal in a specific area? Are they not having adequate access to the curriculum? What is the question we want to have answered? What is the barrier we want to have removed? You're going to identify expected results and outcomes. So what will the student be able to do as a result of the assistive technology we want to implement? You determine what will be measured. So that could be speed, quantity, quality, rate, accuracy, endurance. What is going to change or improve as we implement assistive technology? You're going to assign some responsibility to those team members and set a timeline for completion. Some districts have adopted that 35 school days for an AT assessment, even though it's not an assessment in the same way that other assessments are done related to qualifying in a specific area. AT is not an area that you necessarily qualify in. You're determining a need for an assistive technology accommodation to remove a barrier. And you certainly, as the assessment team, want to set some timelines to that, whether that's the traditional 35 school days, as in other types of assessment, or another time frame. Perhaps you need a longer time frame for specific types of trials. So once you have that plan created, you're going to gather information, And this would be from multiple sources, and here's some ideas on things you'll be gathering information on. Some of this you would already know: student strengths, their needs, some of the environmental expectations, the task you're wanting them to complete, and some current levels of performance and those barriers to participation and independence. So we're going to analyze information to help us identify tools and strategies for trial, and then we're going to conduct trials once we've identified some tools. And then we move on to analyzing the data from those trials. Then we're going to reassess as changes occur. So as the needs of students changes, the setting changes, there may be a need to reassess and trial other tools. So this is one process that QIAT provides us with, and again, you can download that and create your own process for your district. The WADI Assessment Guide also provides some of the same steps, from gathering information, decision-making, trial, and trial use. You can find the Wisconsin Assistive Technology Initiative assessment package at this link. Let's just dive a little bit deeper into the process that WADI provides, and that is the information gathering, so the student strengths, their needs, the environmental expectations, and the tasks. So very similar to the QIAT plan. We've got the decision-making process. Here's where you're again identifying the question, clarifying the question, asking yourself what tasks does a student need to perform that they're currently not able to do, and then which assistive technology tools may be an option to then remove those barriers. You're generating some solutions of AT tools and strategies to try, selecting the solution for trial, and then implementing that trial to see how effective it is. In the trial use, the student uses selected tool in the customary environment. You're taking data again on what you've identified that will need to improve. Then you're discussing results and you're documenting. You're reporting the results of the trial to the team. You revisit the assessment question to determine if the appropriate tools. You document the appropriate tools and the potential impact on the student's achievement, develop an implementation plan, and document the tools and implementation plan in the IEP. So here's just a review of the resources, because there is a third one that many districts use, and that's the SET framework. We've taken a look at the Assistive Technology Assessment Process Planner. Let's take a look at the Wisconsin Assistive Technology Initiative's website, as well as the SET framework website. We've taken a look at the Assistive Technology Assessment Process Planner. Now let's take a look at the websites for the Wisconsin Assistive Technology Initiative and the SET framework that provides some documents on assessment of AT needs. This is the Wisconsin Assistive Technology Initiative's website, and you'll see under Publications, Assessing Students' Needs for Assistive Technology. This resource is divided into chapters. The first chapter is on the process of assessing assistive technology needs. Then you see that each chapter is dedicated to an area of need. If you remember back to the AT consideration forms that we discussed in the previous chapter, you remember that you identify an area, a goal area, that the student may need assistive technology in order to fulfill their goals in that area or to have access to curriculum. So this resource is divided into different categories. You see AT for seating, positioning, and mobility. You see AT for consideration and AT for computer access, and you can see the other chapters there. It makes sense that if you're identifying that a student needs assistive technology to fulfill goals in a certain area, you would have assessment processes related to the need for assistive technology in that area. And this resource breaks down the areas. We're not going to go into the different areas specifically, but know that each area has a process for assessment and could be adopted by your district as your procedures for assessment of the AT needs in these areas. Joy Zabella is the author of the SET framework, and under SET documents you'll find some helpful resources on assessing the needs for assistive technology, specifically the data gathering form and the tool selection form. I wanted to let you know where those resources are so that you can consider them as you develop processes for assistive technology assessment in your districts. Let's move on to Quality Indicator 2. Assistive technology assessments are conducted by a team with collective knowledge and skills needed to determine possible assistive technology solutions that address the needs and abilities of the student, demands of the customary environments, educational goals, and related activities. Who provides assistive technology assessments? This varies greatly across districts. There are different models of AT service delivery, and so there may still be the expert model in your district where there is an AT person or an AT team responsible for leading the AT assessments. Capacity building model where the IEP team is very involved in conducting that assistive technology assessment. These are the people that know the student best, know the customary environment best, and the tasks that the student needs to complete. It makes sense that the IEP team would be heavily involved in the assessment. There are different realities, though, in districts. In some districts, there's no one person that's responsible for assistive technology. This slide just reflects that there's different realities in districts as far as who is supporting assistive technology assessment within districts. The Wisconsin Assistive Technology Initiative has an area that talks about who is involved in assistive technology assessments. And here are some things that they list. A person knowledgeable about the student, that may be the student or the parents or the family members. A person knowledgeable in the area of curriculum and learning, usually a special education teacher, depending on the areas that the student qualifies in. A person knowledgeable in the area of language, usually a speech language pathologist, if the student then qualifies in the area of communication. A person knowledgeable in the area of motor, often occupational therapist or physical therapist, again, if that's an area that the student qualifies in. There may be a person knowledgeable in the area of sensory disabilities, a vision or hearing specialist. A person who can commit district resources towards technology, purchasing, and maintenance, and staff training, and usually this is an administrator. There may be an AT specialist there or a person from IT that's knowledgeable in the area of assistive technology and the technology that's available within that district. Let's move on to Quality Indicator 3. All assistive technology assessments include a functional assessment in the student's customary environment, such as the classroom, lunchroom, playground, home, community setting, and workplace. This comes directly from the law, IDEA, as well as the Washington Administrative Code. Talks about assistive technology assessment being in the customary environment and being a functional assessment. These resources give you some structure to gathering data related to that customary environment. The WADI Environmental Observation Guide and the information gathering tool that I mentioned on the SET website. Quality Indicator 4, assistive technology assessments, including needed trials, are completed within reasonable timelines. The IEP team, or the team conducting the assessment, would establish that time frame unless the district policies and procedures dictate that timeline. In other words, if the district feels that 35 school days is the timeline that the assistive technology assessment needs to adhere to, then the district would be following that. Often, the question of assistive technology needs comes up after the child has met eligibility criteria, and we're looking at, do they need assistive technology in those eligible areas? So the areas that they are eligible in, are they needing assistive technology? The district will need to determine what kind of timeline there needs to be for the AT assessment. I need to mention the trial period because we need to provide sufficient opportunity for the student to trial different types of technology to meet the needs, and sometimes that goes beyond the timeline of the 35 school days that we have in the state of Washington. As long as that team is communicating about that assistive technology assessment process and establishing some guidelines, then there should be some flexibility in relation to the trialing of devices. Quality Indicator 5. Recommendations from assistive technology assessments are based on data about the student environments, and tasks. We already mentioned those forms available for data gathering, but certainly we're taking some data related to the effect of the assistive technology on the student. We talked about establishing the key question for the assessment as well as what we're measuring. So you would already have some baseline data, and now you're making sure that you're taking data as the assistive technology tools are trialed. You're taking this data across environments and across tasks to assure that it is truly meeting the need of the student. Here's some resources that relate to assistive technology assessment. These are tools that provide you with some data collection ideas around specific areas. And so I won't go into these different assessments, but just wanted to let you know that there are tools available for different areas, such as the protocol for assessment in reading. You are taking data on the student's comprehension across different ways of accessing text. The set scaffold for tool selection, part 1. This allows the team to look at various tools and descriptors of tools that specifically relate to the student's needs. This is part 2 of the form, and you're looking at the short list of tools that the team is considering, and you're justifying choices with the set data and the descriptors. We're looking at if this tool is systematically available within the district or the school, or if it's programmatically available, meaning in their special education classroom, or if it's an additional tool that is not generally in the student's environment but is needing to be added for support to that student. We're also looking at services needed, training, planning, coordination for the student, staff, and family when you're thinking of what's needed with those specific tools that you're considering, what kind of services are also needed. Here are some additional resources. WADI has an assistive technology trial use guide. We talked about the WADI AT forms already, as well as the SET tool selection form. Quality Indicator 6. The assessment provides the IEP team with clearly documented recommendations that guide decisions about the selection, acquisition, and use of assistive technology devices and services. So you're looking at the reason for the assessment, the process of the assessment, the results of the assessment, and then your recommendation with a rationale to why you're selecting one tool over another. Many teams are going to document this in the IEP. Some schools or districts, some districts require that report, the assistive technology assessment report, while others have this documented in the IEP. Indicator 7. Assistive technology needs are reassessed anytime changes in the student, the environment, and or the task results in the student's needs not being met with current devices and or services. As the student changes and develops, as the environment changes and they transition to new environments, and as the tasks change, we're also looking at if that assistive technology still meets the student's needs. And so anytime we feel like the assistive technology is not meeting the current needs, then we're looking at a reassessment. So the reassessment is not happening just every 3 years as it does in eligibility, but also when the student's needs change. You are doing some reassessment and maybe some trial of some new tools. This is a quote from the chapter. Team members who participate in decision making and then implement their own decisions are knowledgeable and empowered. This points back to the need for a team approach and that the IEP team should be heavily involved in the AT assessment process. When the IEP team is involved in this assessment process, they're going to be the ones coming up with the idea, and the student included as well as the family included, and so you're going to have greater buy-in when you have this team approach. Here again we list the resources. There's no need for a district to reinvent the wheel. There's many high-quality resources available to districts in relation to setting up procedures around assistive technology assessment. Here are some suggested activities. Review the Assistive Technology Assessment Process Planner and consider how you might adapt it for use in your school district.